One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Where are you losing your audience? Where are you getting into an episode, really like talking about all the incredible things that you know that will help them so much, but people on the other end are turning you off? Ooh, it's a hard one to think about, right? I know I don't want to think about someone starting an episode and then deciding, I can't listen to this today, or this is too much, or I could list off so many other reasons, which we're going to get into today, because I want to talk about where you may be losing your audience and how to avoid them turning off the dial, putting their earbuds down, or just saying, I cannot do it today. I'm done with this podcast. Oh, because I don't even want to think about it. It makes me so sad to think that someone would stop listening to the podcast for so many of these fatal mistakes. So we are going to cover, I have seven reasons why someone may be turning off your podcast, and you're going to want to listen to every single one of them. So do not turn this off. Don't turn the dial down, and do not take those earbuds out, because this is a juicy episode. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we? Okay, so if you're wondering, where did Crystal come up with this? Where did this idea come from? So this topic recently came up with another podcaster. We were talking about ways that people are easily losing their audience, and you may not even know it. I think that that's like the scarier part, is if you're looking at your stats and you're like, man, my stats used to be a lot better and now they're not. Or maybe you're just starting your show and you're listening to this and you're like, I want to avoid all of these things. I want people listening to my show and sticking around for the long haul. So I want to share with you the top 7 mistakes that podcasters are making that have listeners either stop listening to their show temporarily or disengaging with their content altogether. And what that can look like is someone can turn it off, like just not listen to an episode. So we're going to get into like specifics of why people are doing this. But if some of these things happen repeatedly, this is the thing that I want to because mistakes are okay. We talk about mistakes all the time on this podcast. You know, I air all of my dirty laundry. I tell you all of the mistakes that I constantly make. There is no perfection around here, but there are some things that could be really hurting your journey. And I want to just kind of shed some light on them, these little trolls, these little monsters that live in the podcasting closet. And let's say, hey, we're not going to do these, or you're going to at least be aware of them. That way, if they happen, they don't happen consistently and they don't happen super often. So you don't have to worry about if this is going to really ruin the experience for your listeners or not. You're like, oh, okay, I made a mistake. Let's move on. Let's make sure that doesn't happen again. So before we get into them, because like I said, there's 7 that I want to share today, but there is a story that I want to share because I recently made a mistake. In over 1,200 episodes, I did something so dumb. And I've never done this before. So I don't even know how this happened, but I thankfully, the team at Buzzsprout is so incredible. I was uploading an audio and I was like, why is this not working? Something is so weird. I'm getting this weird error message. I'd never seen it before. Do you want to know what I did? This was so dumb. I had been clicking around in an episode. It was an interview episode. It was actually the last episode that I just did. It was, Justin's interview. And I had clicked mute on one of the audio tracks. I don't know how this happened, but I had muted everything. So when I exported it, there was literally no audio. It was just it said how long it was. It said how long the file was. So it still captured everything, but it was all muted. How are you going to have a podcast if it's all muted audio? So I'm, again, airing my dirty laundry, telling you all of my stories so that you know over 1,200 episodes in, I'm still making mistakes. I still make mistakes. So that is not the thing that we're going after. Perfection is non-existent, but I do want you to avoid these specifically today because they could have your listeners turning off your podcast. So let's dive into these. So the very first one, number 1, is terrible audio levels. Okay. I was the worst offender of this in the beginning. I feel like I just now realized this isn't in my notes here, but I have a lot of stories for most of these mistakes that I have today, and they're coming at me in real time. I remember I had done an interview in the beginning, probably around episode 7 or 8. And whenever this podcast was the Rookie Life. And it was so bad, the audio levels, meaning somebody was listening in their car and my audio was super loud. And then the guest audio was really, really quiet. So you had these 2 opposite ends of the spectrum where here I am with my loud booming voice and I'm talking super loud. And then my guest, I had not fixed their audio to match my loud booming voice or brought me down like a peg to get a little bit quieter. So it was this stark contrast of super loud voice, really low, their audio was it was so low. So they told me, they were like, Crystal, this interview would have been great. Don't you love it when somebody starts a message to you that's it would have been great if, and they said, if the audio was fixed. I had no idea. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew you take the audio files, you throw them into Audacity, and boom, you have a podcast episode. And of course, I'm listening back to it, And I don't know how I did not realize that it was so bad. I don't even know. I have no excuse for how bad it was, other than I just didn't know what I was doing. But jumping from really high to really, really low or vice versa, is a bad overall experience from your listener. If they're bleeding from the ears 1 minute and then they can't make out like the voice of a mouse the next, then it's just a bad experience. So what do you do to combat this? I tell people, if you are a Buzzsprout user, sign up for Magic Mastering. It's 100% worth it. I love the way that they market this. It's like the Instagram filter for your podcast audio files. And basically what it does is you upload your audio file, it runs it through this processor, this awesome filter, and then it spits out a leveled audio file. And that's what I do. It's one of the reasons why I don't do so much editing on my podcast, because I don't have to. I record on here, and then I use Hindenburg, which actually has a built-in auto leveling system. So it does it on its own. Like when I import interview files, if I'm loud and then the other person isn't as loud or whatever, it will bring everybody's audio up to the same place. And then I can make all of ours like lower or higher if I need to. But you don't want this like back and forth of low, high, low, high, low, high. It's annoying. It's annoying. I'm sure you've listened to podcasts this way and you're either on a run and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to turn it down. You're grabbing your phone out of your pocket and you're like, it's way too loud. Or you're in the car and you're going back and forth and turning that dial. It is so annoying. And I can't do it. So that's like number one. So I gave you Buzzsprout Magic Mastering. The other one is Auphonic. It's another tool that you can check out. And it does the same thing as Magic Mastering if you're not a Buzzsprout user. So go check these tools out. They are absolutely worth it. Auphonic is actually free for, I don't remember the time limit, if it's 4 hours a month or 2 hours a month. I don't remember what it is, but you can go check it out. But fix your terrible audio levels. It's just, you don't have an excuse anymore. Now you know. If you did not know before this episode, now you know. You have no excuse like I did. Go fix it, please. Please go fix it. There are resources to help you go do that. So that's number one. Number two, too much distraction in the background consistently. Now, I know you could have a lot going on, right? You could have kids yelling unexpectedly, the dogs are barking, there's fire trucks going by, there's lawnmowers, and even like unexpected construction crews that just like show up next door. And you're like, are you kidding me? This was like the one day a week that I record anything. And then all of a sudden, my next door neighbor is deciding to, jackhammer something in their driveway. It's like, oh my gosh. But usually these are temporary or maybe even fleeting, right? Like maybe it'll happen for a second, or maybe it only happens one time in one episodes. Like I feel like people are pretty forgiving of that, right? It's like, oh, okay, like I remember this one podcast I listened to, they never really have a lot of those distractions in the background, but they did one episode and I thought, oh, there's a fire truck. Like you normally don't hear fire trucks on their show. But I haven't heard it again. I heard it one time in one episode. They have like over 500 episodes. And I heard it one, and I'm like, oh, okay, like that's not that big a deal. But if that happened every single week, consistently, something annoying like fire trucks super, super loud in the background for the entire episode, most listeners don't have the tolerance to come back. They won't. And I don't think that you should put up with it. Like as a listener, you should not put up with that consistent, kids screaming in the background, dogs barking for every single episode, or just things that are it's distracting. That's what it is. It is distracting. Now, I'm guilty of this. You've probably heard Wally. This is our Boston Terrier. You've probably heard him bark in the background of episodes. You've probably heard my kids scream more than once in a few episodes. It absolutely happens, but it doesn't happen every single episode. And if it does happen, it is fleeting. Like it's like, oh, okay, like they realize like, oh, mom's recording something, like we need to be quiet, and it kind of dissipates. But if it happens throughout every episode all the time, it is too distracting and it has to change or people will fall off. they will not keep listening. So that's just the harsh reality of it. It's just too distracting from what you're trying to talk about. So that is number 2. Number 3, okay, this is going to be a soft one, okay? Like let's not get too offended by this one, but it is true. You're telling way too many personal stories or tangents that have absolutely nothing to do with your topic. Okay. So yes, it's perfectly fine to update your audience here and there on what's going on in your life. But if it is not relatable at all to your audience or the reason they're there listening to your show, you're probably going to see a drop in engagement. Now, I was having another conversation with a podcaster the other day, and they were talking about how there are shows that they were recommended and they turned it on and they were like, why is she talking about what she ate for lunch yesterday? And it took her like 5 minutes to talk about it. And it didn't have this story of, oh, she's bringing it back around. Cause you know how we'll do that, right? Good storytellers can tell this really off the wall story and they're like, oh, she landed the plane, right? We get it. Now I see how she tied this topic and that topic in her lunch, all together, and it all makes sense. But if you're telling random stories or random updates about your life and it's not relevant to your audience, they don't care. Oh, that's why I said this one's going to hurt a little bit today because they don't care. They don't care. Now, who's to say that they're never going to care? Okay, I can't say that because I know that there are some people that I follow that I'm like, oh my gosh, that was really cool. They went on this trip and now they're telling us all the details. But again, it's fleeting and it's very occasional that happens. And it's kind of like a once in a while life update and not every single episode. So if you're just talking for the sake of talking and just giving these random updates, I'm going to tell you, consider, are you adding value? Are you actually adding value to your audience? Are you? Maybe you are. Maybe you're adding tons of value by telling them every single day. Maybe you took it as a personal challenge to do something in your life and you said, okay, I'm going to share with you on the pod. This is all the things that I'm doing. But I honestly cannot see how that's going to tie back into a podcast that is related to so many people that are listening to this show. Because I know many of you that listen to this show, and it's usually not going to be relevant. So don't throw in those random stories or tangents that just don't make sense. If you're going to throw in a story, make it make sense to the content that you're creating. So that is number 3. Number 4, you have way too many ads or lead-ins into an episode. If it's 10 minutes into your episode, so we're past 10 minutes at this point, but if it were 10 minutes into your episode and you haven't even started talking about the topic for what you're talking about that day, you've already lost people. And I have been listening to some shows that have gotten really big in recent years. And it used to be okay, they have about, a 2 or 3 minute lead in. That's okay. They have their promotional stuff. They have, ads, they have whatever they're doing, but it's only the first 2 or 3 minutes. And then boom, we're in it. We are getting into the topic at hand, whether it's the hook of the episode, where they're, sharing kind of what I do at the beginning. I do a little hook where I'm sharing, this is what we're talking about today. Maybe I'll throw in a story or why we're talking about it, or, it varies from episode to episode. But if that doesn't even start until 10 minutes in, what are we doing? We're just talking for the sake of talking, and that is not what podcasting is about. So consider breaking up the ads that you're going to share, because I love ads. I think ads are great for podcasting, right? Whether they're self-promotional and self-sponsored stuff, or it's ones where you are other people are sponsoring content to be on your podcast. I think all of these are great. However, there is too much. There is too much. And if you cram it all right into the beginning and it's 10 minutes into the episode and you haven't covered anything of value, your listeners will tune out. They're not going to stand for it either. And why should they? Why should they listen to all of this long jargon and you just babbling about all this stuff. Like, why should they? Why should they? Don't take so long. Spread those ads out through the rest of the episode. They may be more effective that way anyway, but don't shove everything right into the beginning of an episode. So that's number 4. Number 5, we're just moving on down the line here, and that is preaching or lecturing to your audience. Now, what I mean by this, you are just talking at them, and I'm just going to call it what it is. This is how I see it, like they're idiots. Okay, I see this a lot, unfortunately. And this is, I don't understand how these podcasts keep going. I don't, because I personally, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's a personal basis, right? So this is all subjective anyway. If you're listening to this, you probably know this is all my opinion. This is everything I'm sharing today is my opinion on how you can easily lose listeners. But preaching at people or just lecturing them the entire time on how bad they're doing or how, from a holier than thou, like, oh, I am a sophisticated podcaster and you are just lowly little specimens that are just getting started. There's an issue. Like, I have hard issues with this when you are not relatable to your audience at all. So I want to make something clear. Even if you are the expert on your topic, like you are the go-to big dog daddy of your topic, you need to include your audience in the experience because otherwise they may stop listening to your show because you're not relatable at all anymore to where they are on their journey or where they want to go. They're just like, we're at apples and oranges now. We're not even in different seasons of our journey. We're just two totally different individuals that can never even be on the same playing field. And so that's one of the reasons why I really like to include stories on the podcast, because like I said earlier, I'm 1,200 episodes in. I know a lot of people are like, they hear that number. I mean, I still hear that number. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, that's a lot. That is a lot of podcast episodes between this show and my daily show, the Potty Report. Like, I get it. That is a lot of podcasting that I've done. And people could say, oh, she's so far along though. Like, she doesn't get me. Oh, no. But do you remember the stories that I just told about the very beginning whenever my audio levels were awful? It's why I tell those stories, because I still remember. I don't care how many episodes I go into, I still remember where I messed up and the fatal mistakes that I almost made because they hurt. Those mistakes hurt. Getting those messages that said this episode would have been great if, like, it hurts. And I remember those. So if you are an expert on your topic, if that is how you are positioning your podcast, don't become unrelatable to your audience. You want to be on a level where you, even if you're way far ahead of where your listeners are in their journey, you still need to ground everything in their reality, not just your own, but in their reality too, because that brings them into the conversation. And it doesn't feel like you're just preaching at them from this level that they'll never reach. You're giving them the opportunity to see where you are today, and you're showing them the roadmap to how to get there. So super important. I'm really, really big believer in this. And I think just from a personality standpoint, it's how I like to approach content too, is I want to be the leader that's just like hooking arms with you and saying, come on, we got this. Let's do this together. And we're going on the journey like arm in arm, and we're locked and loaded. You should see me right now. I got both of my arms up right now. And I'm like, you can't see me, but I got my arms up. I got my big white scrunchie on my arm. And I'm just like, oh, I'm looking like a 90s kid through and through with my scrunchie on here. I just realized it was on my arm. Anyway, okay, that's irrelevant to the rest of this conversation, but had to throw that in there for a little quick visual. Number 6. Okay, this is a big one. Making everything too promotional. Now, this is one that I have mixed feelings about, but it's one that I hear all the time from other people who are in the podcasting space. They will come to me and they say, did you listen to so-and-so's podcast? They have way too many ads. They have way too many things that they are selling. And there's like 2 minutes of actual stuff that they're talking about on the podcast. The rest of it is ads, whether it's ads for their own products, it's ads that are sponsored, it's ads for this. So it's like, they're selling out. I get it. Like I hear, me too. Like I hear it. And I understand that if you have a business, like you have to sell stuff. I totally understand this. But this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier in like the consistent basis of it. Like I will have episodes that are purely promotional. Their only purpose in being created is to promote something, whether it's an affiliate promotion, it's my own promotion, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, I want you to ask the question, am I still adding value to my listeners, or has my show turned into a late night infomercial that people wake up and turn off because they're annoyed? Did this ever happen to you? I remember falling asleep. We have a TV and like, it was like the living room or whatever. We'd have a couch in there and I would fall asleep, in the 90s, my 90s kid. And I would wake up and it would always be like Billy Mays and the ShamWow like screaming at me on the TV. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, it's like 2:30 in the morning. I fell asleep on the couch. I need to get up and turn this off because it's annoying. And that is what your podcast will turn into if everything is overly promotional all the time. Your listeners will disengage, they will turn your episodes off, and they will not come back. Okay? Make this very clear. They will not come back if every single episode is selling, promo. Like it's annoying. It is annoying. It is an infomercial if that is what your podcast has turned into. So don't make this mistake. Don't do it. Did I say in any of that, don't do promotional episodes? Absolutely not. I want you to sell things on your podcast. I want you to make money with your podcast. But don't make every single episode purely promotional because people will turn it off. It will happen. Okay, that is number 6. Number 7. Oh my goodness, number 7. We have to close on this one because it's very important. And I have to say, it's a skill that I've developed over time to not make these happen. And number 7 is boring interviews. Oh my gosh, I will turn off a podcast episode so fast if the interview is boring. And you know what I'm talking about. You know when the host asks a question and the guest answers with yes.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Or no. And that's it. There's no follow-up. Like it's like, have you ever done this before? You've talked to people, right? Like you've actually had real conversations with people. And it's just, I don't know, like I have a very strong opinion about this, that in 2023, we should not have boring podcast interviews. Like, period, the end. I don't even think people have the excuse of, oh, I don't know what a podcast is. Everyone knows what a podcast is, okay? Everyone knows what an interview is. And so if you're listening to this and you're uncomfortable about being a host and you're thinking, am I a bad interviewer? Like I can't get people to answer questions. I can't do this. Then you are not vetting your guest enough. This should be part of the vetting process, that your guest can form complete sentences and actually answer the questions that you're going to ask them. Because if that is not happening, your interviews have just the highest potential of being super boring, and you're going to be frustrated as a host. Because I have had, oh my gosh, okay, let's saddle up for a second, because I'm like, oh, I got to cross my legs on this one. We got to get a little bit closer to the mic. I've had so many podcasters ping me on Instagram or send me an email and say, Crystal, I just did this interview, and do I have to air it? Like, this is what they asked me, like, do I have to put this out? And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Like, what happened? What was going on? I'm thinking like the audio file was terrible, or something happened in editing. And I'm ready to be like, ooh, let's troubleshoot the editing. Let's see what we can do. And they're like, the guest was so boring, like painful. Like their voice is cracking when they're telling me this. They're like, it was painfully boring listening to this whole conversation. Like, it was terrible. Like, they gave me just yes or no answers. It was not fun. Like, typically I have a lot of energy. This guest, like, I was thinking about what I was going to make for dinner the whole time they were talking. I was not engaged. And I'm like, ooh, that's bad. That's bad. And if it's bad for the host, it will be exponentially worse for the listener. And it will happen. It happens to all of us. So, like, again, this is where it goes back into, like, let's not have that perfectionist mentality and think that bad interviews will never happen to you. They will. They will. Boring interviews will happen to you. But how do you avoid this? Is you have a clear vetting process where you don't just say yes to anybody on your podcast. I have an episode that I did a while back that's all about selecting guests, like finding good guests for your podcast. I want you to go listen to it. If you're about to start interviewing people, or you want to know how to get like better, if you've had some of these on your podcast, you're like, Crystal, how do I find the right people? How do I vet them better? Go listen to that episode. It's going to be linked in the show notes. I want you to go check it out, because it is important. And I can spot a boring interview a mile away, probably like 100 miles away at this point. And it's why I don't just say yes to anybody that sends me an email that says, hey, I want to be on your show. Nope. No. We have a very clear vetting process, and I encourage you to do the same, even if you have a small show. Okay. This is another thing, is you don't have to wait until you have tons of listeners on a really big show to start having these like parameters in place to keep boring people off your podcast. This is how you protect your content. Protect it like it's a little bitty baby chick that you don't want to get like, taken away from its mama. You don't want that to happen. So protect your content. Protect it and say, no, sorry, we don't allow, put that on a sticky note. I need to make a t-shirt that says, we don't allow boring guests on our podcast, because oh man, it's the worst. It is the worst. And I don't want it to happen to you, because your listener engagement will fall really, really quickly. Okay, that's it. That is all 7. They are going to be linked in the show notes. So if you're like walking or doing whatever, you want to recap, go check out the show notes for this episode. But if you want to know more about how to not make your show boring, or your audience will disengage with it or take the earbuds out, turn the dials down, then I want you to join us in Profit Podcasting. Because if you're listening to this in real time, the brand new version is officially out into the world. And I'm so excited. I do wish you could see my face right now, because I have the biggest smile on my face. Oh my gosh, it is the thing that I'm most proud of. I've never made something in profit media, like in the history of my business, that I have been more proud of. And the reason why is because I've worked with so many podcasters that have told me, actually just somebody recently said, you know what I love about this course is you are sharing with us not just the basics, like the need to know things. You're telling us the things that we would have never thought to think about, because you think about these things all the time when you're creating stuff. And I really attribute that to being part of this community, like on a regular basis. Like, I'm engaging with y'all at least 4 to 5 times a week. Like, in the Facebook group, I'm talking to you through email, like you're sending me DMs on Instagram. And I'm so grateful for every single one of the students that have already gone through Profit Podcasting. Like, I think at this point, we have almost 200 people that have gone through the program and given me helpful feedback to make it better every single time. So I want you to go check it out. Go to crystalprofit.com/course to check it out. Again, it's going to be linked in the show notes for this episode, but I want you to go see all the fantastic results that we have there. I love showcasing all of the previous students that have podcasts that are in the top 5%, the top 10%, the top 2.5%, and we even have some in the top 0.5% of podcasts out there. So I want you to go check it out. Go see if you're there. Oh, like what a fun little Easter egg. Like if you're a previous student, I want you to go see if your review, everything, like I want you to go check out how it is displayed on this page because it's so fun. It just makes my heart so happy because the people that I really wanted to highlight on the page where you're going to see when you go to crystalprofit.com/course is not just the ones that started a podcast. Because let's be honest, you could record something on your phone today, publish it, and call it a podcast. But the thing that I really wanted to highlight is the people that have been podcasting for years at this point. There's multiple people on there that have been in this community for 3 years, some of them 4 years, and they've had a show and they've kept going and they actually enjoy it. That is what I want to highlight is the fact that people enjoy their podcast because that's what I want people to find. Like if it feels hard, it feels overwhelming, it feels confusing, it doesn't have to be. Like here's your sign. It does not have to be hard or confusing to create a podcast. I want it to be fun for you. I want it to be a creative outlet. And I also want it to be something that helps you grow your business. If you have a digital business, this is what I want you to use as the medium to get new leads in, to create relationships, to build a foundation for you to engage with your audience. So again, go to crystalprofit.com/course to check out the brand new version of Profit Podcasting. But that's all I have for you today. So if this is your first time tuning into the show, what a fun episode to listen. Make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening to this podcast. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.